The click of Arthur Vance's $2,000 Italian leather shoes on the marble floor was the only sound he permitted himself to hear. The rest of New York was just noise he filtered out. He adjusted the cufflink beneath his bespoke suit, his eyes narrowing on his Patek Philippe watch. 3:02 p.m. 2 minutes behind. He despised waste. He despised the chaos of the city waiting outside the glass, a chaotic soup of lesser beings he had to navigate. He pushed through the revolving doors of Vance Tower, hitting the pavement like a surgeon entering a contaminated operating room. A wall of stifling July heat and the smell of hot asphalt and exhaust hit him. He scowled. A cluster of tourists blocked his path, gaping at the skyline. Obstacles. Everything always an obstacle. As Arthur stepped off the curb, his mind already on the Zurich call, a figure darted from the chaos. A blur small, fast, and unseen until the impact. A sharp jolt, a collision of worlds. "Watch it, kid," Arthur snapped, his voice cold, barely looking down. But the boy was already gone. A split second later, a cold, hollow shock registered. Arthur's hand instinctively flew to his inner breast pocket. It was empty. For a man who had not been truly shocked in 30 years, the sensation was electric, violating. He spun around, his face, usually a mask of controlled indifference, flushing with a deep, personal rage. He spotted him, a small black child in a faded t-shirt, weaving through the crowd with a speed that spoke of practice. "Hey!" Arthur's voice was a raw bark, a sound that made Seos tremble. "Stop him! He stole my wallet." Fueled by a sudden white-hot surge of adrenaline and indignation, Arthur, a man who never ran, plunged into the crowd. He shoved past a startled businessman, his long strides breaking into an undignified, furious run. The chase was on. Arthur's mind snaps to a single cold thought, one born of decades of prejudice. "I'm not letting some street rat get the better of me." The chase was undignified, and Arthur Vance hated it. Sweat was already staining the $5,000 silk lining of his suit jacket as he vaulted over a pile of black trash bags. He was breathing heavily, a rasp in his throat he hadn't felt since his college squash finals. This wasn't his world. The alley stank of hot garbage and old cooking oil, a narrow canyon of brick and rusted fire escapes. He saw the boy, the street rat, as his mind spat out again and his fury surged. The kid was agile, sliding through a gap between dumpsters that Arthur had to squeeze through, ripping a thread on his jacket. He didn't care. It was the principle, the sheer audacity. Leo looked back once, his eyes wide with a desperation that was almost animalistic. Arthur saw it, but it didn't register as fear. It registered as guilt. It only made him run harder. But the boy's determination was perplexing. He was running from Arthur, but he was also running toward something. The chase ended as all such desperate things do, with a mistake. Leo's worn-out sneaker caught on the splintered edge of a broken pallet. He stumbled, falling hard onto the gritty pavement, skidding on his hands. He scrambled up, but it was too late. Arthur was on him, cornering him in a dead end, a high, graffiti-covered brick wall. "You have no idea who you just stole from, boy," Arthur seethed, his chest heaving. He pulled out his smartphone, the screen flashing in the dim alley. "I'm calling the police. You're going to jail." Leo scrambled to his feet, his back against the wall. He wasn't defiant. He wasn't armed. He was just small. He was shaking violently, his small fists clenched. "Please, mister, no," Leo whispered. He held the wallet out, his hand trembling. I wasn't. I just needed the cash." The boy's voice cracked, and a dry, hopeless sob cut through Arthur's rage. "My mama, she's sick. Real sick. They won't give her the medicine. She's dying." Arthur froze, his thumb hovering over the 9 on his phone. The words "my mama, she's sick" echoed in the confined, stinking space. He'd expected defiance, excuses, perhaps a knife, not this. This was the truth. He looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time, a small, terrified black child covered in grime, tears cutting clean paths down his cheeks. Arthur's rage didn't just fade. It evaporated, replaced by a confusing, heavy, absolute silence. He was, for the first time in his adult life, completely speechless. Arthur lowers his phone slowly. "What medicine?" he asks, his voice no longer sharp, but dangerously quiet. "Show me. Take me to her. Now." The walk to Leo's home was silent, but for Arthur, it felt louder than if they had been shouting. Every step took him further from his world and deeper into a reality he had spent millions to avoid. He followed the small boy out of the alley, his mind still reeling. He half expected this to be a trick, an exaggeration. "My mama, she's sick." The words echoed, but he still couldn't grasp the reality of them. He was about to. Leo led him several blocks away, into a dilapidated tenement building that seemed to sag under the weight of its own despair. The hallway was dark, smelling of mildew, stale cooking, and a hopelessness that clung to the air. Arthur, in his $5,000 suit, felt absurdly out of place, as if he'd stepped onto a different planet. His expensive shoes looked obscene on the cracked linoleum. Leo pushed open a door on the third floor. The apartment was tiny, and the heat hit Arthur like a physical blow. A single, loud fan rattled in the window, doing nothing but pushing the hot, stale air around. It was clean but bare. And on a thin mattress on the floor, a woman was lying. She was black, in her 40s, and covered in a threadbare sheet. Her skin was slick with sweat, and her breathing was a short, horrifying, rattling gasp. An empty prescription bottle for Tylenol lay on the floor beside her. Arthur's speechless moment from the alley crystallized into profound, sickening horror. This wasn't a scam. This was real. "Mama? I'm back." Leo rushed to her side, his fear of Arthur completely forgotten, replaced by a consuming terror. He tried to wipe her forehead with a damp cloth. He looked at Arthur, his eyes frantic. "She has a heart condition. We waited 6 hours at the ER last week, but we don't have insurance." Leo's voice broke as he pointed to the empty bottle. "They gave us Tylenol and told us to follow up with primary care. We don't have primary care. It ran out 2 days ago." As Leo spoke, Sarah's body suddenly arched in a weak convulsion. Her eyes rolled back. The rattling gasp stopped. She went limp. "Mama." "No. Mama, wake up." Leo screamed, his voice cracking with a terror that ripped through Arthur's shock. The sight of the dying woman and the screaming child finally broke Arthur's paralysis. He was no longer a victim, no longer a billionaire. He was the only adult in the room who could act. He pulled out his phone, his thumbs shaking but decisive. 911, I need an ambulance. A 40-year-old female, unconscious, possible cardiac arrest. 1812 East. What's the address, kid? Arthur looked at Leo, who was desperately, badly pounding on his mother's chest. "Stay with her, son," Arthur said, his voice raw with an emotion he didn't recognize. "Help is coming." The wail of the ambulance siren was a sound of terror for Leo, but for Arthur, it was the sound of his own world finally responding, a world of action, authority, and control that he knew. He had barked orders at the paramedics, followed the ambulance in his private car, and now stood in the bright, buzzing fluorescent lights of the Lenox Hill ER. The air smelled sharp and sterile, a jarring contrast to the mildew and despair of Sarah's apartment. Sarah had been rushed into a trauma bay, disappearing behind a set of swinging doors. A triage nurse, her face weary, tried to lead Leo to the main waiting room. "You can't be here, honey. Family waiting area is out front." Leo just shook his head, terrified, clutching a small purse, his mother's ID, and hid behind Arthur. Arthur, already on the phone with his personal physician, waved the nurse off without looking. "He stays with me." Just as he hung up, 2 NYPD officers approached. "Mr. Vance," one asked, his eyes scanning Arthur's expensive, disheveled suit. "We're responding to your stolen wallet report." Arthur, his mind on Sarah's rattling breaths, waved them off. "It's fine, officer." A misunderstanding. The wallet was returned. The older officer ignored Arthur's dismissal, and his gaze locked onto Leo. "Is this the kid?" His tone shifted, instantly cold, accusatory. "Son, we need you to come with us. You fit the description of several other pickpockets in the area." He stepped toward Leo, reaching for his arm. Leo flinched violently, pressing himself against Arthur's leg. In that instant, Arthur saw it all, the prejudice, the assumption. He snapped his phone shut and stepped directly between the officer and the boy. "He's not going anywhere." "Sir, it's protocol," the officer insisted, his hand dropping to his belt. Arthur's voice dropped, cold and powerful, radiating an authority the officer wasn't prepared for. "He is a 12-year-old minor. His mother is in that room," he pointed to the trauma bay, "in critical condition. And as of this moment, he is under my legal protection. You will not question him, and you will not touch him, unless my attorneys are present. Is that clear?" The officers, stunned by Arthur's ferocity and the sudden, unassailable mention of attorneys, hesitated. They knew they'd hit a legal wall. They were used to dealing with kids like Leo, not men like Arthur. Just then, a doctor in scrubs, his face grim, pushed through the trauma bay doors. "Mr. Vance? We have a problem. A serious one." The doctor's words cut through the tension with the police, replacing one crisis with another, far more expensive one. "We've stabilized her, but her heart is failing. She won't survive the night without it." The officers, now irrelevant, lingered for a moment before backing away. Arthur didn't even notice them leave. He followed the doctor into a sterile, windowless, quiet room. Leo trailed behind, a silent shadow clinging to Arthur's jacket. "We've stabilized her," the doctor, whose badge read Dar Patel, explained, his voice low and stressed. "But the infection and the cardiac distress, her heart is failing. Rapidly. She needs an experimental drug, Stelnex. It's not FDA approved. It's high risk, impossibly expensive, and our ethics board can't approve it on this short notice." He looked at Arthur man to man. "Without it, she has hours." "I'm sorry." Leo, standing in the doorway, let out a small, choked sound. He slumped against the wall, defeated. The last bit of his frantic energy was gone. Arthur looked at the boy, then at the doctor. The rage from the alley was gone. The shock from the apartment was gone. All that was left was a cold, sharp focus. "Get me your hospital administrator," he said, his voice quiet. "And the head of your pharmacy. Now." For the next hour, the hospital hallway became Arthur Vance's boardroom. He was a whirlwind of calm, precise, ruthless power. Leo watched, stunned, as this man he had stolen from transformed. "Marcus." Arthur barked into his phone. "It's Arthur. You owe me. I need a shipment of Stelnex from your Geneva facility. Now." He clicked over to another line. "Jim? I need a jet cleared for an international medical transport. Wheels up in 30. He dialed again. "It's Vance. Get my legal team. I need a full, comprehensive liability waiver. I am assuming all personal and financial responsibility for a patient at Lenox Hill. Get it to their administrator in the next 10 minutes. The doctor and the administrator, who had rushed to the hallway, just watched, speechless. This was a power they had never seen wielded. Finally, Arthur signed the digital waiver on the administrator's tablet. He snapped his phone shut and looked at the doctor. "The drug will be here by 4 a.m. Keep her alive until then." He hung up his last call and finally, sat down in the vinyl chair next to Leo. He put a heavy, warm hand on the boy's shoulder. "We're going to try, son," he said, his voice suddenly tired, but full of resolve. "We're going to try everything." Dawn breaks, painting the sterile hallway in a gray light. A nurse runs into the waiting area, holding a small, insulated box. "They're here. They have the medicine." The long night bled into a tense morning, the silence in the ICU waiting room broken only by the steady, artificial beep of the monitors that had tethered Sarah to the world. Arthur sat beside Leo, his own suit wrinkled, having not slept. He remembered the fury of the chase, the cold prejudice in his heart when he'd called the boy a street rat. Now he just watched the door waiting. The doctor, Dr. Patel, finally emerged. He was exhausted, but he smiled a small, genuine smile. "She's responding," he said, pulling off his cap. "Vitals are stable. The drug worked. She's going to make it." Leo, who had been frozen in his chair, burst into tears, not the dry sobs of the alley, but the loud, relieved sobs of a child. Arthur just closed his eyes, his entire body slumping as he let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for 12 hours. Weeks later, The stifling heat of July had given way to the cool, crisp air of early autumn. Arthur's grand, classic estate in Westchester was quiet, the library filled with the scent of old books and lemon polish. Sarah, frail but alive, was recovering in a guest suite that had been converted into a state-of-the-art recovery room. Leo found Arthur in the library, reading. The boy hesitated in the doorway. "Mr. Vance, I'm sorry. For the wallet." Arthur closed his book, setting it aside. He looked at Leo, his gaze steady. "I'm the one who's sorry, Leo. I didn't see you. I just saw something else." He paused, the shame of his initial judgment still raw. "And I was wrong." Later that afternoon, they were in the garden. Sarah, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, sat in her wheelchair on the patio. Arthur, wearing a simple sweater, knelt in the soil beside Leo, showing him how to plant autumn mums. Leo, his face streaked with dirt, was laughing a real, unrestrained child's laugh. Sarah watched them, her heart full. She called out, her voice still weak but clear. "Arthur." He walked over, wiping his hands on a cloth. She didn't say thank you for the money, the jet, or the house. She just looked him in the eyes, her own glistening. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for seeing my son." Arthur nodded, understanding the weight of her words. It had never been about the wallet. It had been about the respect, the humanity he had initially denied them. Arthur places his hand on Leo's shoulder, and the two look at the garden they are planting together. The truth that left Arthur speechless in the alley was not just one of poverty, but one of shared humanity, a truth he was finally ready to hear and be part of. In the quiet corners of our busy lives, the most profound connections are often forged not from comfort, but from chaos. Like a hidden garden blooming in the city, true compassion finds a way to grow when we finally choose to look past the surface and truly see one another. A simple act of kindness, given without expectation, often has a way of finding its way back home to us in the most unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, consider sharing that warmth with someone who may just need to be seen today.